welcome to the third of our UDN webinars on sustainable urban development. This third session is going to focus on governance this morning. My name is Eddie Adams. Together with Sally Nisho, I'm the co-moderator of this series of 6 webinars. The webinars are linked to the European Commission's Handbook on Sustainable Urban Development Strategies. We have a link already to the handbook in the chat box. And the whole purpose of these events is to help deepen our knowledge, build our capacities, strengthen our connections, share good practice. So we'll be hearing this morning from some great examples linked to our governance theme. If you've had a chance to look at the handbook, you'll know that there are 3 dimensions to governance in the document. The first is looking at multi-level governance. Second one is about bottom-up participation. And the third is about widening stakeholder involvement. And we've got 3 presentations today which are examining different angles and sharing different examples of how that works in practice. But not all of the knowledge is at the front of the room today. We've got 400 people plus registered for this event. I can see the numbers clocking up as I'm speaking. And we know there's a wide range of knowledge and experience in the audience. And we'd love to hear from you about what you know, what you've done. We'd also love to hear your questions and comments. You can do that sharing the chat bar. So though you're muted and we can't see you, we can engage with you through the chat bar, and you can see already there's some content there. When you use the chat bar, please remember to click the message everyone button. We had a problem earlier in the week when we lost some messages down a black hole because they went to the wrong place. So just double check that on WebEx that your message is going to everyone so we can see it. And we're also going to be using a couple of polls, some questions to engage you at the beginning, and also just before we jump in with our initial introductory observations from the JRC. So that's the plan. Let's have a quick look at today's agenda, and I can just walk us through that before I hand over to Sally to take us into the first of our polls. So this is our big picture. You've probably looked at this already online. Shortly we'll have Sjorge van Herden from the Joint Research Centre of the European Commission, who will be giving us an overview of the JRC's role, talking a bit about the UDN, the Urban Development Network, saying a little bit about the handbook also. And then Sjorge is going to go on and set the scene for our session today, giving us a bit of context on our on this key issue of governance. Sally's then going to go out to the poll to poll the audience and get some thoughts on you around what governance means for us. It's one of these words which means different things to different people. It's a rather abstract concept, so we're going to try and concretize that a little bit. Then we've got the first of our practice examples. Comes from Slovenia. It's a really nice example of local authorities collaborating and engaging with the national administration. So it's focusing on multi-level governance. And Zdenka Simonovic from the city of Ljubljana will be giving that presentation. We then like to mix things up a bit. We've got some surprise guests, maybe not such a surprise because it's on the list, but we have Martin Ferry with us from the European Policy Research Centre. Many of you will know Martin. He's been involved in writing the handbook. He has deep expertise and knowledge about the issues we're talking about today. And we're really happy that Martin will be coming in to give us his reflections on the first speaking points, and also joining us later to play back some of the headlines that he's hearing from our speaker inputs. We also have Laura Hageman Ariano joining us from DG Regio, who'll be giving her reflections. We'll then take a short break. We're then back to hear from the City of The Hague, talking about their community-led local development model, which is really interesting, and we'll see a video, and we'll also be hearing from Sam Herolian and Ton Overmar. And then to wrap things up, we'll be going to Portugal to hear Karen Pereira talking through with us the really interesting and innovative range of things which Cascais is doing to engage citizens in decision making. So it's a really rich set of inputs today. We're really excited about the content we have to share with you. We'll then get some further feedback comments from Martin and Laura before Laura and I have a quick chat at the end about what's coming down the tracks in terms of cohesion policy. And then I'll be handing over to Sally just to remind us about the next webinar that's coming up, which is going to be focusing on integration. Okay, I hope you're looking forward to it as much as we are. I'm going to pause this now, hand over to Sally, who's going to run through the first set of polls with you this morning. Thanks a lot, Sally. Good to see you.
Hi, good morning, Ed. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today for this third in the series of the UDN webinars focusing on governance. We really hope that you'll be able to contribute to the conversation by using the chat, as Eddie said. So please feel free, put your questions and comments in the chat. We'll all try to respond in real time, but also take those questions at various moments during the webinar today, as Ed just explained. But first of all, we want to just ask and see who we've got in the room with us. And we're going to do that with a couple of polls. So could I have the first poll up, please, Vasily? We'll have a first poll. It will come on your screen on the right-hand side. Hopefully you'll see the first question for the first poll.
Okay, we are ready.
Thank you. Easy question for the first one. Is this your first UDN webinar in this series? We've already had one webinar on strategy and one on territorial focus. This is the third. So please just quickly say yes or no. Did you already attend a UDN webinar? Yes. Or if you haven't, if this is your first, tick no. We'd like everybody to participate. Panelists, speakers, tech team, please just hit one of those buttons and we'll have a look in a minute to see how many people are with us for the first time. Vasily, how are we doing on the responses?
We have 100 responses yet.
Okay, so let's, we've got 30 people who haven't said yes or no. Please just quickly tick one of the buttons on the right-hand side, yes or no, and we'll close that poll and see if we've got many first-time participants in the room. Let's close that poll and see. The results will come up on the right-hand side and replace the poll very shortly, and we'll see who we've got.
Let's wait 10 seconds more.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll move into another question to see who you are, what your role is. But let's see first if you're a first-time participant. Let's see what the results are. They should come up on the screen shortly. Pretty evenly split. So we have 43 people who said yes and 63 who said no, some with no answer. So we've got some people who've been to one of our first two webinars, but 63 who are here for the first time. So welcome to you. Hope you enjoyed today, and please think about signing up for the future webinars as well. We've got 3 more to come in the next 2 weeks after this one. So let's go to the next poll, please, Vasily. So this time we want to know who you represent. Excuse me. So if you could look down that list there and see which kind of organization you're representing today, who you work for. We've got various different options here. Managing authority or intermediate body, a national level agency, city authority, regional. If you're from the knowledge sector, a university or research body, from an NGO, private sector or other. So just quickly choose one of those buttons and let's see the spread of profiles that we have participating today, because we hope to be able to provide good knowledge and networking for all those different types of profiles. We want to look at the issue of governance from lots of different perspectives and think about it from different activities. How are we doing, Vasily? How many people have hit the button? Please all participate.
We have about 100 people, so I'm going to
still 100. We seem to hit 100, and let's get the others on board. Please answer the question. Easy question. The poll has ended now, so we're going to see the results shortly.
Let's wait for the last users.
The last users, okay. It's helpful for us to know who's in the room, so please do join in this. And I can see some people have started putting questions in the chat, which is great. Continue to do that throughout the next 2 hours. It really helps us to know what you're thinking, what your questions are, what your perspectives are on what we're doing. So here are the results, pretty balanced. This tends to be the trend with these webinars, which is great. The 2 bigger groups are from managing authorities and from cities, which is probably to be expected, but quite a spread across other roles as well. So good to know, and I hope you all managed to take something from these webinars, whatever your perspective is. And let's go into the last poll, please, Vasily. And on this one, we're asking some questions which kind of relate to the moment we're in 2020, online, in a pandemic, working very differently from a normal circumstances. And given that we're talking about governance today, we wanted to ask you, in your work, what are the biggest challenges for your governance-related work in the pandemic? So by governance, we mean running projects, keeping in touch with stakeholders, especially thinking about participatory approaches, how you're working with your stakeholders, but also working with other levels of government, such as at regional, national, international level. So here are some of the difficulties we think you might be experiencing, and we're quite interested to know which of those are the biggest challenges. I think you can tick all that apply. So are you finding it hard to sustain your relationships with stakeholders? Have you got digital fatigue? Do you perceive digital fatigue in the work that you do? Is there a digital divide? Do you find that some stakeholders cannot engage online with problems with either connection or equipment or skills? Do you find that the priorities of your organisation have changed to other more response-related work, which has taken you from or made it hard for you to make progress with your current projects? And if there's another challenge that you're facing in terms of governance in this difficult year, do tell us in the chat, because we can't hide from the fact that this 2020 is a year when our work has had to change quite a lot. And in many cases, it might be difficult to continue with the approaches that we had before. So how are we doing, Vasily? How many responses do we have?
We are rating now 100, so let's take 20 seconds more.
20 seconds more. So please, you've got the last 20 seconds. Please tick all of those boxes. If you think they're all relevant, if you think there's something else, put it in the chat, and let's see what are the challenges that you're facing in 2020 in relation to the project work that you're doing and the governance related elements of that. Okay, I think we can close that poll and have a look. See what your reality is across the European Union in this year.
Let's take the results here.
Thank you. Okay, we've got, again, quite an even spread. The highest one is that priorities have changed. So yes, not unusually, resources and people have been taken off their regular work and put on some more response-related direct services to people, to businesses in their cities, maybe. Digital fatigue comes next. Yes, hope you don't get too much of that today. Thanks for joining us in spite of this is the way we have to work this year, I think, but thanks for joining us if you're feeling and experiencing around you digital fatigue. Difficult to sustain relationships. I think that's very prevalent especially in projects where you have to work with stakeholders, how to keep in touch with them and either build or sustain the relationships that you have with them. And also the digital divide, a small number said digital divide. There are a few others and we'll look for those in the chat afterwards. So thank you so much for participating in that poll. Keep talking in the chat. Remember to put to everyone so we can all see it, otherwise the panelists might miss your comments. And I'm going to hand back to Ed now to take us to the next stage of the webinar. Thanks, Ed.
Thanks a lot, Sally. Brilliant. And that's really helpful for us to see. And I suppose in a week where we've had some potentially positive news about a vaccine, and we maybe see the light at the end of this long dark tunnel. It's really interesting to see how this is affecting your work. Sometimes we've seen examples of COVID being a catalyst for innovation. People looking at new, different ways of doing things, particularly around this whole stakeholder engagement conversation. But equally, we completely get the thing about digital fatigue. And as Sally said, as dynamic and as interactive and as interesting as possible, because we're all spending way too much time staring at screens at the moment. So thanks for that. We'll come back to you shortly for a few more of your thoughts. Let's keep things rolling along. Let's invite Sjoerde van Heerden to join us. Sjoerde is at the JRC, which is the Joint Research Centre for the European Commission based in Sevilla. Has been one of the key people involved in the handbook, and in fact was one of the key authors of this chapter, the key chapter on governance. Sjoerde, it's great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us. And the floor is yours. Thank you. And I think you're going to share your slides on screen, aren't you? I'll just mute my button here.
Right, I will do that. I will share my screen. Hello, everyone. My name is Sjoerdje van Heerde. Thanks, Eddie. Thanks, Sally. So, as Eddie mentioned, I am employed at the Joint Research Center of the European Commission. And the Joint Research Center is the in-house... Oh, I cannot... Sorry, I cannot go to my next screen. Yes, okay. Let's do it like that. So the Joint Research Center is the in-house knowledge and support service of the European Commission. So basically it consists of, I think, 3,000 scientists that work to provide scientific evidence and support for a wide range of EU policies, among which EU policies for sustainable urban development. Needless to say, those are not 3,000 people, but some of us are working on that. So as was shown by the polls just now, some of you have already attended the previous webinars that are part of this series. But for those of you who didn't, let me just give you a short introduction into the general objectives and structures of these webinars. So first of all webinars take place under the Urban Development Network, which is a network of around 500 cities, urban areas that receive ERDF funding for sustainable urban development, as well as urban innovative actions. And the aim of the network is to gain insight and to improve ERDF implementation in the area of urban and territorial development. So this is achieved by reviewing how European funds are deployed on the ground, and by supporting the exchange of experience between cities involved in integrated sustainable urban development, which is of course exactly what we are doing here today. Let me just, it's quite annoying that I can't, yeah, okay. So in line with this, the objectives of the webinar series we are part of today is to firstly increase our knowledge on integrated strategies of sustainable urban development, both in theory and in practice. Furthermore, we wish to elaborate on the main elements of the Handbook of Sustainable Urban Development Strategies, and today in specific on the chapter about governance. And lastly, we wish to further reinforce and strengthen this community of practice, whereby experiences and lessons learned are shared among peers and in direct dialogue with the European Commission. Now, central to this webinar series is the Handbook for Sustainable Urban Development Strategies. It's a European Commission product which is endorsed by the Urban Development Network, by the UDN. And the main aim of the handbook is to support the design and implementation of integrated urban strategies, specifically, and this is good to point out, within the context of sustainable urban development under cohesion policy during the programming period 2014-2020, as well as the next one or the upcoming one, 2021-2027. The handbook also has a dedicated webpage, which we pointed out already, where you can easily navigate between the chapters, and which also links you to Stratboard, which is a publicly available database that shows you a wealth of data about all strategies implemented throughout the EU within the most recent programming period. So moreover, the handbook is a policy learning tool, and it offers key insights on 6 main components, or building blocks as we call them, of sustainable urban development, among which governance. And the handbook is primarily written for local authorities, managing authorities, and other relevant stakeholders that are involved in the strategy lifecycle. It is designed to help tackle the main issues and challenges in the process of strategy making by offering the reader useful examples, data, external resources, and recommendations. So this brings me to the topic of today, which is governance, or the governance of sustainable urban development strategies supported by cohesion policy. So now the first question is actually, why is governance considered one of the building blocks of a successful strategy? What is the relevance of governance? In general, it's observed that good governance arrangements are important because they contribute to more transparent decision-making, more inclusive decision-making, more responsive decision-making, and also more effective decision-making. And actually, this message will also again be underlined by the new Leipzig Charter, which will soon be adopted under the German presidency of the EU Council right now at the informal meeting of the ministers that are responsible for urban matters. And the new Leipzig Charter provides a strategic policy framework for sustainable urban development of the European city. So it's embedded in the European context, and it also acknowledges the EU support for integrated urban development. And the Charter specifically calls for enhanced cooperation between different territorial and governance skills. So it emphasizes the transformative power of cities to realize the European and global agreements that are now relevant at the urban scale, or to realize them at the urban scale. Okay, well, this is all very well, of course, but what exactly does governance refer to? And there's no real strict single definition, but it generally touches upon how society or groups within it organize to make and implement decisions. So it actually often involves a continuous process of negotiation over power and resources. In theory, governance does not make an assumption about which actors are most central to the process. However, when it concerns a form of democratic governance, political institutions and elected bodies are always assumed to play a leading role. Now, when it concerns the governance of sustainable urban development strategies, it refers to, in general, to how relevant authorities, together with the relevant stakeholders, decide to plan, finance, and manage a specific strategy. Next to administrative bodies and agencies, governance arrangements, of course, may include a wide variety of actors, such as the civil society, NGOs, academia, social movements, steering groups, and of course also the private sector. So similar to the other chapters of the handbook, we tackle and discuss governance on the basis of three main issues at stake. So I will highlight all of them in this presentation. And for governance, these concern multi-level governance, a multi-stakeholder approach, and the bottom-up participatory approach. So, as said, the first issue at stake is multi-level governance. Multi-level governance refers to arrangements that include different levels of government. So the local, the regional, the national, the supranational, and sustainable urban development strategy governance is inherently multi-level. It requires the involvement of the local level, as we know, as well as the regional and or the national level, depending on where the managing authority is seated or located. And obviously, the EU level is also structurally involved, although less so in the actual strategy governance process. In this respect, it's the European Commission mainly sets the conditions and provides the financial resources while it tries to improve the governance process, offering peer reviews and feedback from past programming periods. So with regards to multi-level governance, it's important to acknowledge the need for coordination between different levels. So to effectively tackle the objectives that are set by the strategy. So in this respect, also a flexible and functional approach is needed, whereby the principle of subsidiarity is also respected, which is actually to say local problems should be dealt locally, but coordinated at a higher level to prevent unwanted consequences that might occur outside the borders of the local entity or that will spill from one level to another. Now, while this all sounds good in theory, it remains a huge challenge to build administrative capacity and to benefit from experiences available at the different levels of government. Sustainable urban development strategies that are implemented under cohesion policy, as you know, require that local authorities to the selection of operations. However, if desired, managing authorities may also delegate more tasks. And also the post-2020 regulation stresses the alignment and coordination of interventions between different levels of government. So maintaining strategy governance as a key complementary feature of sustainable urban development. However, some observations from this current programming period suggested actually that the task delegation to local authorities was rather limited and that managing authorities are still dominant. And one reason that is given for this is that managing authorities have concern over the capacity at the local level. For that reason, some managing authorities carefully monitor all delegated tasks, or they participate as an observer in municipal commissions. And although this may be necessary at first, this limited or supervised delegation can in the end also be instrumental to capacity building, since it can pave the way for increased delegation of tasks for the next programming period. Furthermore, also a recommendation in this respect is that technical assistance is available to help implement Commission-funded programs and projects. Specifically, managing authorities can examine the use of technical assistance to strengthen the institutional capacity of local authorities. The support can take the form of workshops or training sessions. But it can also contribute to the costs of participating in meetings regarding the preparation, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of the strategy. And the establishment of new bodies to take on responsibilities is also another way to overcome limited capacity. While the nature of these new governance arrangements might differ, one key objective of them all is to boost the implementation capacity. And special support structures may also increase the capacity in the longer term, so potentially becoming a catalyst for institutional changes that will further facilitate the governance mechanisms. And later on in this webinar, we will hear more about how limited capacity has been overcome by using alternative governance structures, as has been the case for the strategies in Slovenia. And then the second issue I identified in relation to governance is the multi-stakeholder approach. And this refers to a fundamental aspect of sustainable urban development, whereby the input of various stakeholders is mobilized. So especially urban development strategies that include an integrated place-based approach, they typically involve a broad range of actors. A main challenge that is related to this is how to ensure that all relevant stakeholders are identified and how to ensure that stakeholders are continuously engaged, or at least at the right moments in time. So some recommendations to smooth and support this process is to first start mapping all potential stakeholders in a structured way. So as such, you also avoid including only the usual suspects, which might be more proactive also, and also capture those unusual suspects. And then once you have all those stakeholders identified and approached, you should discuss, or it's suggested to discuss, the expectations, the responsibilities, and the process involvement as early as possible, so that it's clear for everyone how their role will look like and which parts they will take. And later on in the webinar, we will also hear more about such a successful approach from Cascais, Portugal. So finally, the third issue at stake is the implementation of a bottom-up and participatory approach. Cohesion policy covers the development of every city and region in the EU, and its objectives require governance mechanisms that focus on subnational levels and emphasize these bottom-up processes. So to this end, also the 2014-2020 programming period introduced a new territorial tool to address local development called community-led local development. better known maybe as CLLD. Well, within this handbook, we also discuss further means of stimulating and fostering citizen participation. One specific issue we address in this chapter is how CLD can contribute to bottom-up and participatory approaches and what we can learn from it. Partially, this follows from the observation that CLD actually had a rather limited uptake. So a more general recommendation given in this chapter, but also what specifically applies to successful implementation of CLD, is to explore the different ways in which citizen participation can be fostered. So this refers to engagement beyond tokenism, as it's sometimes called. That is to say, engagement that goes beyond informing or consulting citizens, but rather it moves towards partnership, delegated power, and citizen control. Now, following that many cities and urban areas have experimented with citizen engagement and that also very useful guidance exists, think about the tools designed by Urbex in this respect, it is certainly also very useful to look at the lessons learned and to share instruments of participation between cities. Furthermore, again, technical assistance is available to build more knowledge about CLD. In this regard, CLD responds to a need to find ways to actively engage citizens and also to build trust with them. So it's a bottom-up form of governance that should allow to trigger a new way of approaching the territory, creating the conditions to pursue social innovation and to identify unexpressed needs by the citizens. And currently, one of the best examples of urban CLDs is that of Scheveningen in the Netherlands, which has been established within the ITI mechanism of The Hague. And we will also hear more about this case in the webinar later on. Okay, hereby I've come to the end of my presentation. So thank you for your attention, and please use the chat as we've discussed already before for any questions, but also feel free to send me an email if you have a question later on. So for now, I'm looking forward to the conversation and to hear all other speakers. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, George, for that great input. Really clear, really concise. I particularly like the fact you introduced some key words for our conversation: transparency, inclusion. You also picked up on some of the contextual things, the new Leipzig Charter. We might also talk about the new priority objective 5, about bringing Europe closer to the people and how we involve people more in decision making. I also like the fact that you referred to some of the difficulties here. I mean, you talked about CLLD, for example, and we'll hear from The Hague. So this is not a kind of airbrushed view of our world. So we want to hear where people are getting stuck. We want to involve you in the conversations in the chat. And thanks for asking some of your questions. I know Sally's keeping a close eye on those. We'll come back in with those shortly. But let me hand over to Sally now. We're just going to go out to a quick second set of polls just around this theme of governance before we invite Zdenka Simonovic to give us the first presentation for one of our city examples. So Sally, over to you.
Thanks, Eddie, and thanks, Schuche, for that sort of setting the scene for us for the next 3 presentations. So we want to ask you a little bit now more directly about your own governance experience and in relation to the themes that Schuche just introduced to us, such as multi-level governance, participation, multi-stakeholder approaches. So let's have the first question, please, Vasily, on the polling on the right-hand side. In this first question, which you'll see on the panel on the right-hand side, we want to know a bit about your own experience of multi-level government. So multi-level governance. So there are several different options that you could choose here. Would you say there's a good coordination between your city and regional level? Is there a good coordination between city, regional and national levels? Is there a good coordination between city, regional, national and international levels? Or is there poor coordination between all levels? So this is looking at the different levels at which we work and thinking about the relationships, the structures, the frameworks that you work within to see what the coordination is like along that sort of vertical axis of governance. So this is not science, these are anonymized answers. Just give us your gut instinct when you look at that and think, what's your reaction to that? How good is it in your member state? And we know it'll be different across different member states because federal structures are in place or not. Sometimes in very small member states, some of those levels aren't even that important. So please, how are we doing on the responses, Vasily? We've got
we've got about we have about 90 responses, so let's wait a little bit more.
Let's wait. And it's true, we haven't put other. It's possible that you have, for instance, a good coordination between city and national level, but not regional. But we didn't want to give you too many options here. Just to have a quick go at which is the closest to your experience in those, and see what we get. And I agree with you, Casper, that we haven't put all the options there, because that might have been a bit too complex. It's just a kind of a finger in the air to see what we experience in terms of multi-level governance with the people who are on board today. So let's maybe close that poll now and see what we've got in terms of the answers there.
Yes, 5 seconds left.
Okay, thank you. So it'll give us a sense of just a broad brush picture of the issues related to multi-level governance and how people experience that in their own work.
And we have the results now.
Thank you. People maybe found that one hard to answer, but oh dear, the biggest answer was poor coordination. So that's a challenge for the future, which I think we maybe can explore in the next hour and a half, and need to work on maybe more in future. That most people, the biggest number of respondents was that there was poor coordination at different governance levels. And the first one was the most positive one, that there's good between city and regional level. So that's interesting to note, that potentially between city and regional, that relationship and the coordination is better than in other cases. Okay, thank you for trying to answer that one. Let's move to the next question. This one is a bit more about your experience of different participative governance instruments, and we're going to hear about at least 2 of these as we go forward this morning. So just tick all of those that you're familiar with. Are you familiar with community-led local development, participatory budgets, citizen panels, youth assemblies, or is there another type of participation tool that you're familiar with in your work? Please put E and then tell us in the chat, because we'd like to know about other cases where there's good work going on, and there's lots of innovations going on across Europe in terms of encouraging participation at local level. So just tick all that apply. Please participate in the polls. It's not just, it's just gut instinct. Just tick the ones that you think you know and submit, and we'll have a look at the answers just to get a sense of, yes, ITI. ITI is coming up quite a bit in the chat, so Ed will pick that up too. We've talked about ITI in the strategy seminar, but we'll also think about ITI going forward in other webinars too, but we can pick it up today. There's obviously a lot of interest and a lot of experience of ITI. And somebody else saying here that one of the options that we didn't put down was between cities and the European Union. So that's an interesting one. There's a good cooperation between cities and the European Union. That was on the multi-level governance framework. So can we close this poll and have a look, please, and see what the results were?
Yes, let's take the last 20 seconds.
Okay, thanks. Still time to hit a button if you want to. We'll see which of those are the most common or most known across Europe.
And here are the results.
Okay, so the biggest number was community-led local development. Interesting. So more people are familiar with that than the other methods. Participatory budgets, quite a few for that, and citizens panels, youth assemblies the least. And we've got 15 examples of others. Please put in the chat those 15 people. ITI is clearly one of them we didn't have on that list as a participative governance mechanism. But we'll keep telling us if you have other practices and cases that you'd like to feed in, because the JRC and us as colleagues were very interested to hear about that. Okay. So let's go to the last question here, please, on the polling before we move into our learning from practice presentations. This one is just, you have to pick one of these, please. So we're thinking now about when you're working to involve urban stakeholders, which is the biggest barrier that you face with a multi-stakeholder approach, when you're trying to involve stakeholders in decision making? What's the single biggest barrier? And we've listed a few here. Again, there's another option, so you can put more in the chat. But for instance, a lack of interest amongst citizens, the complexity of the political system, fear of losing control from local governments, then maybe that's a fairly scary or risky process, lack of facilitation or skills within the local authority, or timescale pressures, because it's clear that participation takes longer when you take a multi-stakeholder approach. It's longer than making quick control decisions, central control decisions. And do put ITI in the sorry, anything else that you have under other, put it in the chat. We'd like to hear about that. So just tick one of those and we'll see what comes up in the results. How are we doing, Vasily, on response?
I think we need about half a minute more.
Okay, so please submit just one of those, your gut instinct, which in your view, for you, is the biggest barrier to multi-stakeholder approaches in relation to decision making at local level. And if you think there's something else that's the biggest barrier for you, please tell us in the chat. Hit the F button for other and tell us in the chat.
And now we have the last 20 seconds.
So the poll has ended. We're just calculating the results. The WebEx platform is, should I say. Thanks, Vasily, for doing that and pushing the right buttons for us. Let's see what the results are here. Yes, it said we should have had multiple options. I kind of agree with that. We're forcing you to choose one here, although I can understand that several people would want to tick most of those boxes, but we're just forcing you to think about one here. So the biggest one was actually interesting, fear of losing control. So local government having issues with the idea of losing control. When you have stakeholders involved, they might make decisions that are not necessarily what you would have chosen as a local government. And so fear of losing control was the top one. And after that, lack of facilitation and skills amongst local authority staff. So the ability, knowing how to work with stakeholders is one of the capacity building needs maybe that brings in. So thank you for participating, those that did. Please put in the chat if you have other ideas and suggestions and we'll pick them up. And I'm going to hand back to Eddie for now.
Thanks a lot, Sally. And thanks just for reminding people this is not a scientific exercise. We just want to get some feedback from you, a flavour of your experience that helps our presenters to pitch their presentations. It also helps us understand the kind of level of knowledge and experience. And the ITI thing, I mean, we've got 6 separate webinars, but they're all connected, of course. And ITI was heavily featured in our last session where we had the presentation from Brno, for example. I expect it will pop up in each of our conversations. So it's good that people are mentioning ITI, and it's been one of the success stories, I think, of the current programming period. I'd like to invite Sam Perulian from The Hague. Sam, can you come in and join us at this stage?
Yes, of course.
Hi there, nice to see you. So Sam, you were already mentioned by Shorja. The Hague is a nice example of community-led local development. We noticed that quite a few people are aware of the concept, but I think you've maybe pushed it further in The Hague than most people have been able to. So thanks for stepping in just now. I think you're going to show a video first and then some slides. Is that right?
Yes, I'm here with my colleague Ton, and we thought it would be nice to first show a short clip, and then afterwards we can go into what's happening in The Hague. Okay,
great stuff. The floor is yours, and let's load up the presentation, the video, and then we'll go to your slides afterwards. Thanks, Sam.
CLLD. CLLD stands for Community-Led Local Development. Here are some key things to know. CLLD is an area-based strategy aimed at involving local actors in shaping the implementation of EU objectives. Wait, hold up. What does that mean? Well, CLLD is a method that allows for a participatory approach to local development. Community-led local development all starts by getting together with the people that know what matters on a local level. Think of neighborhood councils, representatives of civil society organizations, education, local government representatives, business associations, and some other key figures that are locally active. These people get together and establish a local action group. All of these people represent different kinds of interests, but none of them can have a majority. When the local action group has been established, a target area and population is defined. After they have agreed on this, they then perform an analysis identifying the area's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Based on this analysis, they draft the territorial strategy for sustainable local development. This strategy will be the basis of their action plan to make a change on a local level. But to do so, the local action group will need to invest, and in order to invest, you need capital. To attract funds, they can turn to their local or national government and look into ERDF and ESF funding. With a plan and funding ready, they invest in local capacity building, encourage inhabitants to become involved with local development plans, and come up with their own initiatives. Local stakeholders can submit proposals to the local action group with project ideas that are based on the local action plan. The local action group will present these promising projects to the local population and organize a voting round. This way of participatory governance invites local solutions to local challenges and allows for citizens to directly influence their own living environment. What does this look like in practice? Let me take you along and show some of what we're doing in The Hague. In 2016, CLLD was implemented in The Hague with the establishment of the Foundation Initiative on Scheveningen. The strategy of Scheveningen focuses mainly on strengthening the local economy and quality of life in a sustainable and innovative manner. Connectedness, collaboration, capacity building, and local identity are important aspects. With financial support from the ERDF and the City of The Hague, this local action group managed to organize several voting rounds and supported over 30 different projects. The number of local action groups is expanding in The Hague, and more areas are discovering how the CLLD approach can engage local communities. Ready to exchange thoughts on CLLD? Or do you want to learn more about CLLD in The Hague? Let us know and reach out to us.
Thanks for that video presentation from Sam, and the floor is yours now, Sam, for your presentation. Over to you.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
We can, and we can hear you good, so well
Great.
done.
So I hope this short video has set the stage a bit and that it gave a general idea of what CLD is. I saw in the polls that quite a lot of the attendants actually know more about CLD. And for those for whom CLD is new, look into the handbook because it has a really good description on what the approach means. I would like to go into some of the reasons why The Hague has decided to do something with the CLD approach. And there are three main reasons why we are interested in the CLD approach. So for the first one, we jump back in time 4 to 5 years ago. Back then, Tom actually was working on the establishment of a local action group in Scheveningen. And Scheveningen is a district in The Hague, which has a very strong local identity. And back then, there were some tensions between this district and the City Council of The Hague. So there were reasons for the local government to invest in rebuilding this relationship and reestablishing trust and ease these tensions. So the CLD approach was really seen as a way to facilitate this. Then a second reason for us to look into the CLD approach was that, and I think this reason also connects to a trend that is maybe visible in other regions as well. It is this trend where citizens today demand a kind of different relationship with the government, in a sense that they are really wanting to have a say in what is happening on a local level And governments are also responding to that by wanting to find ways to provide space for this. And CLD is really an approach that can facilitate doing this. Then a third reason for The Hague to look into CLD is that today we're facing new kinds of challenges. For the Netherlands, one of these big challenges is the energy transition. For The Hague in particular, because we're very ambitious and we want to be free from natural gas and transition to clean energy sources by 2030, which is a huge transition. And for these kinds of challenges, you really need broad societal support. You need to engage inhabitants. And the CLD approach is really seen as a way to connect top-down plans and bottom-up interests and ideas to find some kind of synergy between the two. So these were the three main reasons why The Hague was considering implementing CLD and started with it in 2016 in the district of Scheveningen. And by now we're working on two different areas, two other areas in The Hague to also see if implementing CLD there can be, can be the right approach. So you might be wondering, if we started in 2016, we must have learned something so far. I want to share four main lessons today, but we can expand on that during the discussion, or ask your questions in the chat box if you have any. But to start off, one of the main lessons we learned is that it takes time. So while 2016 might seem ages ago, especially in times like these, working with an approach like CLD really takes time, and it takes time to build a lab, to build on the relationships. So you don't immediately have a group ready, not in all cases. Sometimes you do have something to start out with. And it takes time to draft this local action plan and get all the interests to the table. So to bridge this orientation phase, up until the moment the local action group will be formalized and a local strategy is ready, you need to keep people engaged. And for this, we learned from our partner in the community lab URBEC network to use ignition money, which is a small budget that is available to realize small-scale projects, so that people know that the CLD is not just a talking group, but you're also really doing something and making a change on a local level. Then a second lesson, and I already touched upon this, is the importance of investing in trust and building on trust. So in all the areas in the district of Scheveningen, but also the southwest area and Mariahoeve, this is something that all stakeholders bring to the table. So that's an important one. Then third one is that no area is the same. So we started in Scheveningen, and we're now expanding with the CLD approach in other areas for The Hague. And it is really no copy-paste method. So each area really needs a different approach depending on the area's characteristics and the people that are involved in a local action group. Sometimes you need to invest more in capacity building in some neighborhoods, while in others there's less a need to do so. Sometimes you also need more involvement or facilitation from the local government than in other areas. So don't expect that there is one right way to implement CLD. And the last one, and that one was very important, a very important lesson for Scheveningen, don't get lost in the bureaucratic maze. Maybe some of you will recognize this one, but one of the downsides of the CLD approach for the local action group in Scheveningen was the administrative burden. And it is very important to find a structure in which the local communities that get involved with CLD can focus on what they are good at and what they signed up for. So leave much of the administrative and bureaucratic aspects with a separate body, or we're still figuring this out as well. But this was an important lesson. So in a nutshell, because we don't have too much time, these were some of the highlights for The Hague when it comes to CLD. And we are really, really enthusiastic about this approach. And we encourage everyone to consider working with CLD, because in the end, there's nothing more challenging than working on local development together with those who are directly affected by this. So we would invite anyone who is thinking about CLD or wants to learn more about what we're doing in The Hague and exchange some ideas in it to let us know.
Fantastic. Thanks a lot, Sam. Sam and Ton, stay with us because we've got a question just to feed back to you. I really like the way you rooted this in a real life issue, the climate emergency and the transition to to clean energy, and how the need to involve residents in those key decisions. So I think that was really, really helpful, making it concrete like that. I mean, you talked about the need for time, the need to build trust, make it easy for people, strip out all the red tape, don't burden them with all the kind of paperwork. So make it as easy as possible. Those are really, really, really good messages to hear. And thanks a lot for sharing those. I'm going to bring Martin in, actually. Martin Ferris, our rapporteur, he's been leaning in, listening actively to your input and also to the words that Shorja had for us earlier on. And then we'll ask Sally just to feed in some comments in the chat. So Martin, first of all, what are you picking up from those inputs we've had so far, Martin?
Well, I think and also from looking at some of the presentations in advance, I think it underlines from what we've heard so far, and thanks to the presenters for the really informative presentations that we've had, it underlines that the strengthening of governance structures and mechanisms is a genuine benefit or outcome of these initiatives, CLLD, but ITI, which has been mentioned as well. These are sort of incentives for reinforcing or strengthening governance structures, particularly at the local level. I think that's been clear. So through secretariats, local action groups, associations of municipalities, and so on. I think it's important to emphasise that this changes the perception of municipalities, not just as project beneficiaries, and even to individuals and communities, not just as project beneficiaries, but as active participants. Not recipients, participants in designing and implementing strategies and projects. I think that's important to note. We can also see, I think, through this, a more cooperative or coordinated governance culture starting to emerge, overcoming this sort of traditional fragmentation or rivalry or competition at the local level for pots of funds. I think this is sometimes, in some cases, at least as important as the results of the projects themselves, developing this governance culture. I think that's something important. Looking at some of the work that we've done and examples that we've heard about, there's funding on the table that brings different partners to the table, sometimes for the first time, to discuss projects of common strategic importance. And I think that shouldn't be underestimated. I mean, we've heard today and also in different webinar series, this sort of evolution towards more integrated strategic projects, and the right governance model is important for that, something that stretches across districts or municipalities and covers these sort of functional areas at different scales. I think that's important. The other thing I would note is that developing these types of governance is obviously challenging. I think about it specifically in the EU context, where there are, if you like, top-down and bottom-up dynamics that have to be combined. We think about it at the EU level, where we have ERDF and ESF with their own regulations that have to be reconciled at the local level for a genuinely integrated approach. That's a challenge. We think at the national level, where decisions are made on the architecture of operational programs at sectoral national levels or regional levels, and CLLD and ITI have to map onto these decisions. Then we have managing authorities for programs who have their own pressures for spending the funding quickly, and sometimes that can put time pressure on developing strategic governance approaches. All of this puts pressure on these bottom-up, really important local governance initiatives. The third point I'd make is about the sustainability of these governance arrangements in the longer term and how you embed them over time, especially in a context of uncertain long-term funding for these things. So when the money starts to dry up, and I think that speaks to the points that Sam and Sjoerd have also made about flexibility in governance. This sort of the idea that it's a dynamic approach over time. So you may have to look for other stakeholders in the private sector, from entrepreneurs and so on, to sustain these really important governance initiatives at that point. I'd also sort of, because we always have to mention COVID in these things, but there could be pressure on this sort of multi-level approach. There, we already see inevitably and understandably a centralisation of some responses to COVID at the national level. So I'm just thinking in the longer term, it's really important that the local level maintains this access to funds, including EU funds, and the ability to steer them, despite these different pressures that are coming in. And the last point I would make is about the importance of capacity. I think a point that's been made clear is that it's important not to think that, okay, to develop these governance approaches, we have to plough in extra resources, substantial new funding or administrative resources. A key issue is to identify and use the administrative capacities that are already in place, to use them in a strategic way. But of course, I would also highlight that in some cases, extra capacity building will be needed. And Sjoerd mentioned the use of technical assistance. There's also the work done by RBAC, the UDN, the handbook that we're talking about today. And I'd also highlight in some countries we found, for instance in Poland, there are dedicated measures to support strategic capacity in smaller and medium-sized towns. There's some really interesting initiatives underway in different countries in Europe. I've mentioned Poland, but there are others too.
That's
the point. That's me up to.
Yeah. Brilliant. No, thanks for that. We'll bring you back in towards the end. I mean, we could, we have to rush things through, but we're kind of up against it. But those are really, really key points, and that capacity building, I think we'll come back to when we go to the Cascais example. We're running slightly behind schedule, but I'd like to see if Sally, maybe we can go time for one of the questions. Sally, we have 2 minutes to fit them all in, but I think maybe something we can maybe play back for Sam and for Ton in relation to what they're telling us about.
Yeah, we've got some great comments and questions in the chat, which I know we can't take now, all of them. Sam and Ton, it would be great if you could answer some of those in the chat once you're off screen. Yeah. That would be a good way of dealing with them. I think one of the interesting questions was about how you reach what you might call the unusual suspects, people who are not the obvious ones who always take part. So how do you reach people behind the usual brigade, and how do you build trust? What's your approach to making durable relationships? We have other questions about social distancing. Like Martin just said, we can't ignore the fact that we're in a pandemic. Yeah. How has that impacted on your ability to gather and discuss local projects? But I think if we just focus on that sort of building trust and reaching unusual suspects, and then maybe look at the rest in the chat afterwards.
I will first go into the trust part in the building or establishing these sustainable relationships with your stakeholders, and this will remain a challenge. We don't have the perfect solution, but I think what I also put into the presentation is the idea of the ignition money, which is really a very helpful way to show people that you're serious about what you're doing. You're providing a small budget to also make sure that from the local government, there's one person involved who keeps involved with this local action group over time, so that that person can build on this relationship. And it is important not only to listen to whatever is your interest. For example, I worked for the Department of Sustainable Urban Development, the Division of Housing. So you might assume that I'm only listening to people from, well, you know, this my file or whatever you call it. But for people, you are the local government. You embody everything. So it is important to take up everything that they're throwing at you and find some way to also put it back into the organization and forward it to people that know more about those kinds of things, but also give it back to the citizens, because that's one of the main complaints we hear in The Hague, is that the local government is going into neighborhoods asking people, what do you think about this or that? And then afterwards, they never hear back from it. So just these small things already really make a lot of difference. So that's short on trust. Maybe we can talk about it some other time. And then the unusual suspects, that was a very, very important one as well for us, because when we decided to go into other neighborhoods and see if CLD would work there, one of the neighborhoods is a more, we'll say, vulnerable neighborhood. We wanted to get in to the neighborhood and see if CLD could also work for big transitions like the energy transition, which is not at all something that people in that neighborhood are concerned about. They are concerned about tons of different things, but not the energy transition. And the chairman just started walking around in the neighborhood, going into these small coffee shops or these small stores and just talking to people that we usually would not talk to as the local authority. And that way he started having these interesting conversations and got people interested in what the CLD approach was and what they could get out of it. So just approaching people in an unusual way might get the unusual suspects into the local action group. And the most important way to keep them engaged is making sure that they can see what's in it for them. And the ignition money can really help with it. So I hope, I'm short on time, but I hope that it answers a bit of your question.
Thanks a lot, Sam.
Maybe I can add two things.
Yeah.
Because about the unusual suspects, they are also probably the suspects that need more technical assistance. This is something that you should recognize. And on building trust, in my experience, you learn the most of others' mistakes. What we did wrong when we started with CLD, we thought it was about giving them the position to alone without the people from the city, and that was a way for us to give them and hopefully to build on the trust. But we could have done better by being really a part ourselves as well of the CLD movement, because to build trust, you need to connect, you need to talk to each other. And as the city of The Hague, we probably left them a little bit too much alone. So we are building on that now. So don't forget that if you start with CLD, the city itself is also a member of that CLD movement.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Ton. And that message about, if you are in the streets as a civil servant, you embody the local government. You are the city authority as far as most residents would be concerned. This notion of following up, don't overpromise and underdeliver, because you'll collapse any confidence and trust that you've built. So, this is complicated, and it's really great to hear the story from The Hague, and it's nice to hear the true version, not some sort of, sort of perfect world version. Lots of other resources you have to share with us. You might want to pop some things on the chat, Sam and Tom, and we can follow up with a package of materials afterwards. All these sessions are being recorded, of course. We'll be sending out a package of the presentations the recording, so you will have a chance to share this material later on. For now, thanks so much, Sam and Tom and Shoja, for getting us started. We're running slightly behind schedule because of our little technical hiccup, but we're going to take a short break now. We will come back again at 11:15. At 11:15, we'll jump back into our two other presentations. Thanks also, Martin, for your thoughts, and stay with us. You'll be coming back in at the end. Go and have a coffee, folks. Do a bit of yoga, do a bit of downward dog for 3 minutes. We'll see you shortly. Thanks very much. So welcome back, everyone. Hope you get a chance to get a bit of fresh air or coffee or tea or something. You're back with us. We've got a nice picture of Cork. I noticed we've got a couple of Cork participants on the call. This is we've got Ileana, who's also, I think, maybe the person who took this photograph, actually. So, Ileana, nice to have you with us and good to have your comments. Keep the comments coming. We may not get to all the questions, but we'll do our best to respond in the chat and also to follow up afterwards. We've had to rejig our running order a little bit, as you noticed, because we had a problem with Zdenka's sound earlier on. He's going to talk about the Association of Slovenian Local Authorities. They're a really interesting and innovative approach to collaboration and having a different kind of relationship with the national government. So, Zdenka, nice to see you. Nice to have you back with us. I'm going to mute my mic, and the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As an introductory information, just to give you the idea and remember where we are, Slovenia, in the context of the cohesion policy, is divided in two cohesion regions, East and West. We have no intermediate level of governance, just the local and national. And historically, we are divided in many local administrative units. At the present, 212. Actually 213 municipalities. Next, please. Among those municipalities, there are 11 municipalities that, according to our constitution, have a special role, namely 11 urban municipalities, which are responsible for urban development in their environment. Those 11 municipalities cover approximately 750,000 inhabitants, or 1/3 of Slovenian population. Next. The association and our practice actually is here being presented as an example of successful activity to overcome some of the difficulties in implementing ITI. So the story of ITI for the association started in 2016, when the situation was the following. So we had the ITI mechanism defined in partnership agreement and operational program. The 11 municipal urban municipalities, which according to the partnership agreement and operational program were the beneficiaries of the ITI mechanisms, have already all of them adopted their sustainable urban development strategies. There was the managing authority, there were the ministerial intermediate bodies established, and there were projects ready to be implemented in the 11 urban municipalities. There was the funding put on table by the European Union and the national government in the amount of 139 million euros of grants and 5 million financial instruments. But one essential building block was missing in that system, namely, I'm talking about the solution in the whole ITI mechanism system that would enable the 11 urban municipalities, cities, to select the projects to be implemented. So, what to do? We had the content, we had the strategies, we didn't have the mechanism complete for their implementation. Next, please. In that situation, of course, every urban municipality look at its potentials and possibilities. And of course, it was really very quickly clear that not every of our urban municipalities was in a condition to be an intermediate body for the selection of the project as it was foreseen to be implemented. So what did we do? The 11 urban municipalities already well cooperated on other issues within the Association of Urban Municipalities, and we thought, well, maybe we can use this association also to solve these problems, and instead of every municipality doing the selection of projects on its own, which would mean that they have to establish all the conditions to be an intermediate body, we can do one intermediate body for the 11 municipalities. Why did we think about this solution? Because it was already 2016. We already lost 2 years of possibilities for implementing projects with this mechanism, and we didn't really the cities didn't really want to lose any more time because we really needed those projects, and so the association was there. It was right away operative. Next, please. We've encountered many challenges, of course, internally. The association didn't really have staff to do all the necessary operations as an intermediate body. How did we solve that? After a long negotiation with the managing authority, we, on one hand, managed to get 0.6 technical assistance for ITI, for being an ITI intermediate body for the association. And of course, we took the people from the 11 urban municipalities who already worked on EU projects, had a lot of experience, and founded an expert commission that would assist the Assembly in providing and implementing the selection of the projects. Of course, we also faced external challenges. One was right at the beginning, bring the managing authority and ministerial intermediate body to accept the association as an intermediate body for selection of the projects. It was not accepted right away. We had to convince them that that's the best solution, and at the end they saw that really that's the best solution. And of course, it was also a challenge for the association to produce everything that was needed to be accredited as intermediate body in the system of cohesion policy implementation. Next, please. So one part of the association serves as intermediate body, and the new body is only the ITI Expert Commission. All the other bodies were already there, and that facilitated and made the process rather quicker than it would be without that. Next, please. So this is the scheme of how the ITI mechanism is implemented in Slovenia. It is implemented in 2 phases. In the first phase, the selection of projects, we have the intermediate body, the association that makes the selection. And afterwards, in the second phase, we have the ministerial intermediate bodies that check all the formal administrative aspects of the projects that are being produced, and the managing authority as, of course, the body that approves the project. Next, please. This is about the funding. Okay, we had, as I mentioned, 139 million euros. for the indicative allocation of those fundings to the different municipalities, there was adopted a methodology based on the quality of the strategies, on the centrality in the region, and the number of population, which was really a number that had not the prevalent impact. Next, please. The results, it is enormous. There is only 1% of ITI funding not yet engaged, that meaning not being in the first or second phase of approval for co-funding. Why that is important? Next, please. Okay, next, it's the same thing, just for those maybe who prefer visual. Next, please. Solutions, please. So these are the results. We have just examples of very successful projects and a very good example of circular economy. Our World Expo panel, which was used in Milan, has been transferred to Pomurje, and it's a getaway information center for Pomurje, and had in end months, pre-COVID months, already 100 visitors. Next, please. The integrated projects that are being implemented in Koper to revitalize a huge area next to the sea. But I don't have the time, unfortunately, to go into details. Next, please. The case of my city, Ljubljana, in which during already the construction of the gallery that should revitalize a huge, a wider area, cultural events are being held. Next, please. And just the last slide, the lessons learned. Actually, what we have learned is that we have to continue if we want to be successful, not only in defining the contents of the project, but also to be successful also in implementing the system. To implement those projects, we need to really to continue to work closely together, the 11 urban municipalities on one side. The other lessons that we have learned is that this is not a one-time, one battle for all the times, because we already see for this, for the next financial perspective, that we are somehow are left aside or not really taken into consideration due time and other constraints, of course, also of the national level. But anyhow, we are still not a mainstream in the stakeholders and partner participatory process for the next financial period. But it doesn't discourage us. Whenever a door is closed to us, we open and try to jump into the window. So we really think that at the end we will be successful as we have been in this perspective. And of course, another lesson that we have learned is don't expect that anyone will propose to use the right solutions. It is better if you can, of course, to gather information and come with the solutions that might be a win-win situation for yourself and for the national or other authorities. And the last but not least, lessons that we've learned is don't start from scratch. Use at best what is already there, because it's the fastest way to act. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zdenka. Fantastic presentation, really comprehensive. And that final message about don't reinvent the wheel, look to use existing structures. There's also temptation to go and create a new thing, and the map becomes more and more cluttered and complicated. So I think that's a good thing for us to bear in mind. It's a great story of transforming relationships that you've just shared with us. And also, Georgia made the point at the beginning about there's a part, we're not doing this for the sake of it. This is actually getting us better results. You can see the efficiencies you've shown in terms of the spend is really, really impressive. I'm also conscious that Slovenia is a small country with no kind of regional tier, so Europe is super diverse. So other people are commenting about, our structures are a bit different. So, you said this isn't one size fits all. It's not a kind of silver bullet, but it's a fantastic example of how you can, reposition things. This example, this case study is actually in the Sustainable Urban Development Handbook. So if you want to hear more, then you can jump in and ask your questions for Zdenka on the chat. You can also go to the document itself. Stay with us, Zdenka. We have maybe some questions at the end for you. So thanks so much for joining us. Thanks for your patience with our little technical hiccup earlier. Let's jump from Slovenia to Portugal. Let's bring in from Cascais, Karim Pereira. This is the third of our examples this morning, and we're looking at this question of widening participation, this question of how we get multi-stakeholder involvement. Karim, great that you can join us. I know that also colleagues of yours are also on the call this morning, so it's good to have you with us. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can. Good morning to all of you. So I can start, right, Eddie?
You go ahead, and I'll mute.
Okay, thank you very much. I will share my presentation. So, okay. Do you see everything?
Yes.
Perfect. Yes. Okay. Thank you for the feedback. So. Thank you for the invitation. First of all, well, I'm sharing our experience from Cascais. Cascais is in Portugal, and well, this is our bay of Cascais, and we have like nearly 211,000 inhabitants. 20% of our inhabitants are foreigners, and we're nearly 100 square kilometers big. And one of our missions is to make Cascais the best place to live a day or a lifetime. So you're all welcome to visit us. Well, Cascais is very near from Lisbon. It's about 30 minutes from Lisbon by train or by car in the west coast. And well, we use our communication channels, not only all the digital that everybody nowadays has to have, but for us the most important is the face-to-face relationship that we have with our citizens. And of course, we never can forget to communicate a very analogical way, and that is through our newspaper as well. So, because communication is not necessarily participation, and as we had a very high abstention rate in the last local elections, we have to be very creative to seduce our citizens to involve in our community. And what we did was design a strategy for citizenship and present a family of ways that our inhabitants can interact with their city hall. So, because people are not all the same, and maybe the youngsters are more into apps, and there are other citizens that are more to the inline, but there are others that are more to face-to-face projects. So we designed all this strategy, and in the apps we have city points, education apps, cultural agenda, Fix Cascais. The online we have the Cascais Participa, that is Particip Cascais. And then in the face-to-face projects, we have the neighborhood tutors, we have the participatory budget, the youth participatory budget that I will explain furthermore. And all these together, they interact together and to do this collective cooperation and also the volunteering for a better education for an active citizenship. These are some examples of our online services. They go from the environment to mobility, to culture, to education, to youth, to open data. So we try to open and be more transparent as we can. These are some digital activities. The Fix Kashkash is, for instance, an app that if I go in a sidewalk and I see that something is broken, I can take a picture and share my location. And if I send that picture, the services will know what they have to fix on that sidewalk. So it's very interactive. And also the city points is to give point out, or not to point out, but to give points to the good citizens. So if they buy secondhand or adopt an animal or do the recycling, so they are given points and they can exchange those points for example, for a ticket to the concert. So very different things to do. Well, I work in the citizenship and participation division that was born in 2013. And these are the areas that we have, like for volunteering, associativism, the participatory budget and its younger brother, the youth participative budgeting, and also other citizen mechanisms that we help others to do. So the Cascais participatory budget is the biggest in Portugal and the most participated. And in the last edition, we had the highest amount of money available. That was 10 million euros. And this is an image of a participatory session. And here, just to point out a picture that we got a certificate from the Urbex Good Practice in 2017 for this PB. Well, the PB has two cycles. This is the first one, that is the decision cycle. And here it gets more into detail. These are the 5 stages of this first cycle. And then we have the implementation cycle. And all these 2 cycles, people, not only the proponents, but also the citizens, they can follow all the process in the website of Cascais Participa or Participa Cascais. This image is from our youth PB, and I like very much this image because it's an image of the first edition. This game was a game that was designed for one purpose, and that was to put these students to decide on their rules for their youth participatory budget. So this project is, first of all, and very important, it is a pedagogical process to students decide about public money and to get in the future more participative citizens, because these students are citizens, but they still don't vote. So here with the youth PB, they can really be active. So Here, this is the youth PB schedule. Here we have also these two cycles, the decision and implementation cycle. It is a little bit bigger than the other one because it has to relate with the school year. And here another image of also students and some of the projects we have. That is the We Propose, the Youth Voice, the Youth Assemblies, and with UNICEF, the Child Friendly City, and also the Neighborhood Tutors and the Health Forum. Well, when we have a problem, we have sometimes to get the solution, and sometimes it is not easy. But if we change our point of view about the problem, we also have another answer to the problem, and this leads us to the success that we want to resolve the problem. So here in this slide, I can show you, I want to share with you what we did here with our democracies. Everybody knows about representative democracy, and it is really very important that we have the representative democracy. But what we're doing, for example, with the participatory budget is a participative democracy. But still, we have the collaborative democracy where everybody is building together. So this is like an ecosystem of democracies or a family of democracies. And they're important because they have to work together. There is not one that is most important than the other one. They have to, sometimes there is the representative democracy, and sometimes we have to practice more the participative democracy. And these all together, they're really important and might be the answer to our problems and lead us to the success. So our citizens, it is really very important that we can identify themselves and through all these ways that we have nowadays to communicate. But today we also heard about trust, and we have to establish trust to towards our citizens to communicate and inform or answer with more transparency that we can. So this is really very important, not only the online answers, but always the face-to-face that for us is really the most important, because, and this is another slogan of ours, because in Cascais we put people first, and that is what I wanted to share with you. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Karen. And you achieved your first objective of making us all very jealous, looking at those wonderful pictures of Cascais and how beautiful it looks. I love your core message. Communication is not participation. So let's not get these things confused. And I've been inspired by the Cascais story for several years now. You mentioned the Outback connection. And I just think the way in which you've built and built and built. I mean, a lot of cities would have said that participatory budget success is enough, we'll just stop there. And that kind of was the start, that was just one of the initial building blocks. So it's a great story, it's very inspirational. I encourage all of our audience to come and have a closer look at what you've been sharing with us. So thank you again, fantastic. Stay with us, we might have a couple of questions for you, Karen, shortly, but I'm going to bring Martin back in now. So Martin, again, with your critical friend role, you've been leading and listening to those two presentations, first from Slovenia on the collaborative governance model, and then also from the Cascais story just now. Again, Martin, maybe just share a couple of headlines with us, and then we'll bring Laura in as well for some thoughts, and then we'll ask Sally if we've got some questions from our audience. Martin. Thanks,
Ed, and thanks to the presenters, to Karen and Zdenka for again really interesting presentations. Really quickly, I mean, I think they both illustrate the importance of responding to this rise of, or this decline in trust in democratic institutions across Europe, which we've all experienced in recent times. Really important from that point of view. To an extent, you could argue that cohesion policy has always been about engagement and partnership. We know it from the partnership principle that's been embedded for a long time now. But sometimes this is just done in terms of consultation processes, which can be quite superficial. These give concrete, on-the-ground examples of engagement with local communities and with citizens, and I think they're really important from that point of view. Again, something that's already been mentioned this morning is the ability to access and target people who are most likely to feel disaffected or disempowered. And we see the examples here, you know, in the Cascais example, talking about youth development and youth support. I think that's really important. This idea that Karen mentioned about face-to-face, the face-to-face dimension important, which I fully support. But again, we have to look at the importance of digital tools, particularly in this day and age at the moment. My point is, I suppose, in a way, it gives more scope to get more people involved. But at the same time, there's a danger of the digital divide that's always been mentioned, people's access and ability to take part in online platforms is an issue. And also, it's something lost, as Karen perhaps alluded to, it's something lost when this face-to-face dimension becomes more limited in terms of the governance process, in terms of this interaction. One of the things that I'd also like to sort of highlight is that often in things like participatory budgeting, ITI or CLLD, when there's a pot of funding on the table, participants tend to want a slice of the pie rather than to work together to use the whole pot in a strategic way. So I think it's really important in these initiatives that they're overcoming this tendency for competition or rivalry to have my slice of the pot. So I think that's really important to highlight too. One of the last points I'd make is the question of, and this is perhaps coming from my own point of view of doing research on these things, how to demonstrate the undoubted added value and benefits of taking these approaches. We've talked about building trust, building cooperation, collaboration, and so on. How do you measure these things? Often it's kind of intangible, at least in the short term. If we want to demonstrate the benefits of these governance approaches to different audiences to say, this is the right way to do things, it's very challenging to point to these sometimes softer, but really important impacts. So that's just a challenge that I would flag up. And the last thing is going back to administrative capacity and the burden. We know there's lots of pressures on local authorities, and these are likely to go up. These are quite innovative and quite challenging things to develop, and it takes time. Maybe it's putting it too strongly, but perhaps it's difficult to learn a new swimming stroke when you're drowning. If you think about all of the pressures, maybe that's putting it too strongly. But thinking about the pressures on budgets and time over the next year or two, this is something else to bear in mind. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Martin. Lots and lots of really kind of rich content in there from your comments. I'm going to go to Sally and ask Sally maybe to share with us a couple of the questions. Lots and lots of things happening on the chat bar. And after that, I'll bring in Laura Hagerman Ariana from the Commission, maybe to pick up a question with Laura and also just to move forward to the next programming period discussion. But first of all, Sally, lots of things going on. Can you maybe pick up a couple of key questions for us maybe to consider at the moment?
Sure. The chat has been really busy. Thanks for that. I think there are a couple of questions for Karen about the youth budget. That seems to have been interesting for everybody and very inspiring, actually. I love the idea of educating adults in citizenship. If they get active at a young age, there's much more chance they'll continue to be active as adults. The questions were a bit about the methodologies you use, especially for people in the 18 to 25 age group. There was a question about the budget, which Karen answered as being, it was €10,000 per school, the participatory budget for young people. But Karen, perhaps you could tell us that. I don't know if you could tell us that as a sort of percentage of the municipal budget, or to be able to sort of put that into context in a Cascais perspective. So those are questions for Karen on participatory budget, especially around young people. And I think the other questions you're going to pick up maybe with Laura we had quite a lot earlier, especially about ITI, the future of ITI, and the fact that sometimes ITI doesn't get transposed and some European initiatives don't get transposed to national level into operational programs, or there was also a question about the circular economy and how that gets European level regulation or programs don't necessarily get translated in the same way nationally. So over to you for now.
Thanks, Sally. So maybe just two things for Karen. One is that question which Martin asked there, which is about the evidence and impact. So how we show this makes a difference in the example of those Cascais. And then, as Sally said, just maybe a little bit more about the youth budget in particular, and maybe what proportion of this is of the overall package. So Karen, could you just give us some thoughts on that, please?
Yes, of course. The general PB of Cascais, then the last edition, that was the biggest amount of money we had for the PB, that were the 10 million euros, is about 15% of the general budget. I don't have that number. 5%. 15%, yes. I don't have that number for the youth PB because the youth PB is a fixed number, that is the 10,000 euros per school. We are doing the youth PB in 15 schools, so it's I don't know the amount, the percentage that is, but the general PB, the big PB, is 15%. Yes. And the other question was about the impact.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, the thing is, nowadays we can say that nobody lives more than 500 meters or half a kilometer from a PB project in Cascais. So this really shows the impact of also 9 editions of the PB in Cascais. And but we don't like only to say this in the territory, because really what for us is important is people. So what we try is to include the maximum of citizens that we can. So since the first edition, we have in the last public session, we have the translation for foreigners, because 1/5 of our population is foreigners. So we try to get those people to get involved in our community as well. So we translate the last session to English, French, or German. And also we have the translation to sign language. And well, in every edition we try to involve more people that we know that are not participating, to have more impact in the decision making. So we know from the first year who is participating in the PB, because we have questionnaires from our external consultants, and we know who's participating are people that are around 40 or 50 years old, that are usually voting in the elections, so they are participating. And we know also that they went to university. So we know that we're not going into the youngest people or the elderly people, and also to others that usually don't come to participate. And what we did last year was we lowered the age of participation in the general PB, so from 16 to 12 in the general PB. And also what we did is we had extra sessions in the afternoon, because the elderly, they don't go out at night to participate. So we had extra just for those elderly and also for the youngest. And another thing we did last edition was we went to institutions that had mentally disabled citizens, and we shared and we showed how they could participate in public sessions. So in the afternoon sessions, we had them as well. So we're trying to be more inclusive and try to capture or to reach out new citizens that usually don't involve. And I think this is also an impact because the ideas that came out from those sessions were some of them like inclusive gardens or inclusive public spaces for children. So really the answers there were really because of our problems. So I don't.
Brilliant.
Is it okay? Or
yeah, absolutely fine. Yes. Yeah. And I'm going to have to come in, but I hate having to come in, but that is a really comprehensive answer. As I say, you've got lots of material to share. There's lots of interest in the things that you're doing. And I know, for example, the Qashqai has an annual event in October, which is a big global event. So, you know, all things being well, that will be back on track next year. So if you're interested in hearing more about the Qashqai story, Karen and her colleague Isabel, who's also on today's call, will be happy to chat with you. So thanks
you're all invited.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. So thanks to all of our speakers. The chat's still busy, so thanks a lot, Sally, for keeping an eye on that and managing that. Let's bring in Laura Hageman Arellano, who's a member of our core team. We've been involved in these conversations in August, curating and designing these sessions. Laura's been right at the centre of those activities. Laura, I know you've been actively listening to what's happening, and we've got an ITI thread running through this. I'll pick up with you shortly. But maybe first of all, let's just ask you, from this rich set of inputs, what are the key takeaways you're picking up from this session this morning?
Hello, Eddie. Thanks to everyone. I don't know if you can see me because I cannot see my own video for some reason.
We can't see you, but we can hear you really clearly.
Okay, perfect. Perfect then. So yeah, thank you very much. Very interesting and variety of different examples that we saw. I have been stricken by this diversity, by the fact that there's no one-size-fits-all solution. Some was saying that even at the neighborhood level, every neighborhood is different, but also that we have come to see that the choices, such as the territorial focus, so if it's a neighborhood, like in the case of Den Haag, or a group of municipalities, or one municipality, as in Cascais, is going also to have an impact on the governance, no? Like on the challenges. We will be looking either at engaging and co-creating with a very concrete group of people, or institutional cooperation at the level of functional urban area, or at using a variety of tools for participation of the different groups of the citizens. And I see now how the handbook, for example, captures this variety and enhances policy learning. And I think it's one of the main values of the handbook. Another point is that we have been seeing across the different building blocks, and now this is our third session, as you mentioned, that processes take time to develop and get rooted and produce results. So if we talk about the strategy design or now participatory approaches and multi-level governance, all this takes a lot of time. There's a lot that can be done that does not depend from the EU policy cycle or the regulations. And as the colleagues from the Hague said, I really liked it. Invest in building trust and don't get lost in the bureaucratic maze is a very good message.
Okay, and just thinking about, I mean, maybe picking up on this, the ITI has been a recurring feature of these discussions. I hope you can hear me, Laura. But so, yes, I can. Yeah, maybe thinking about looking ahead and the new programming period, the new regulations. I presume ITI is still center stage. Can you just maybe share with us, maybe you want to reflect on some of the points about ITI, and then maybe pick out some of the key things people need to be aware of, which may affect this governance, the governance conversation in the new programming period.
Okay. So yes, in terms of the new programming period, Ed, there's no major change of paradigm. we aim at consolidating the 2014-2020. That was a big change, no? So continuing the support to integrated urban development through sustainable urban strategies that are developed and managed by the urban authorities themselves. So this whole objective of putting the cities and bringing the cities to the forefront of the policy and fostering the direct dialogue with them, like also Martin was talking about before as well. Municipalities not as receptors, but as actors. All these will happen in the future under the policy objective 5, EU closer to citizens, and they're all integrated approaches below the regional level or with variable geography like functional urban areas will have the best conditions to flourish on the basis of the thematic flexibility that it offers and the absence of enabling conditions. However, integrated territorial development, including the urban one, can happen within PO5 or outside PO5 using the different territorial instruments available already in the current programming period. So through the mentioned ITI or CLLD. And in this sense, ITI is going to stay. It stays in the future regulation. How this translates into different contexts depends a lot from those contexts. On the urban level, we already see differences depending on the size of the city and the envelope and the territorial context. So we see that it's very used for functional urban areas of big cities, but also for municipal cooperation, like in the case of Slovenia. So there's a great variety of how actually an ITI looks at the end in the reality, on the terrain. There is one novelty in territorial instruments, and is that it's recognized the other territorial tools. So there are tools that are existing or they are developed at the national or regional level. The novelty may not be the tool itself, but the fact that it's now recognized in the regulatory framework and that it can be used as an ITI, because all the prerequisites of the territorial tools are assimilated. So there's a need to have integrated strategies and multi-level governance, participation of the territorial levels in the selection of operations. And that is the same for an ITI as for other territorial tools. Other novelties, no, urban earmarking, it stays, but it could be reinforced up to 8%. So that's a good, also a good news, but continuity. And there's going to be reinforced also in the assistance to cities. We have heard all along the webinar talking about the use of technical assistance, the need to create capacities at the local level. And this, the offer of the Commission is to put in place the European Urban Initiative that is going to encompass all the support to innovative approaches, research, creation of knowledge, and capacity building activities. So just to finally mention that there's going to be a greater focus on working at functional area level and paying attention to urban-rural linkages. So this is all that has to do with the novelties for the next programming period that actually is more reinforced in what has worked under this programming period.
Fantastic, and maybe just, if you would mind just wrapping up, but maybe just share a couple of suggestions about how participants can be well prepared for what's coming down the track. So in terms of the governance conversation that we've been having today, what tips would you have? A couple of things people should think about, just so they're in a good place to be ready to run when the programs are operational.
Well, I would say, and this has not this seminar itself, that the dialogue between managing authorities and urban authorities starts on the territorial focus, the main challenges, the better, because this is essential to have a fit between the challenges at the urban level and what happens on the programs, like we were having in this a question about this at the program and the partnership agreement level. I would say that CLLD is a tool that we have seen that it works, and it actually can help very much to put in place participatory approaches, and we would like to see more people paying attention to this tool and being open to put it in practice. And technical assistance, use technical assistance to boost administrative capacity at the local level. That would be my three main messages.
Super clear. Laura, thanks so much. Thanks for joining us. We're going to start wrapping the session up now. Let's jump to the next slide and just pull out some headlines. I might ask Shortridge shortly to come in and just maybe pick up some of these actions, but let me just remind everyone who's with us that you can access the content of the webinar on the link given there. We've been sending the material out to you, of course, so this is being recorded. We have all the presentations. We can't say often enough, please make full use of the handbook. It is, a really, really valuable resource. It's a fantastically useful tool, full of great examples, many of which we've touched, several of which we've touched upon today. And then we want to leave you with a sense of a kind of call to action, if you like, some things for you to think about. And maybe, Shorter, do you want to just come in and maybe just share these with our audience?
Yes, sure. About the three final calls to action that will all relate back to the webinar of today. First of all, indeed, promote a sense of ownership and trust between all levels of government. I think it became clear this is very important. It's also connected to having a functional and flexible approach and starting collaboration between the different levels of government as early as possible, so that every level is involved from the beginning, which provides a good basis for collaboration. And also definitely invest in good relations, keep stakeholders engaged throughout. Maybe in this respect, I can still add that after you have identified all the relevant stakeholders, it is suggested also to keep in mind that different stakeholders, they might have different motivations to be engaged. So networking possibilities, influence in policy making, cost savings, funding possibilities, addressing a local challenge, and being a...
We just lost you there. Thanks, Sorge. I think we got the message there about, be open to different opportunities, look at these new options.
I think oh, yes? Can okay. The last one? No, sorry. Yeah, I don't know. And indeed, and the last one, just to quickly wrap up, is to investigate in the different participatory processes, including possible advantages of the CLD. And clearly it's a key challenge to keep citizens and communities involved, but gaining the input of local people is also really very important, since it will increase the legitimacy of all your operational decisions, which will ultimately, of course, affect the quality of their lives most directly.
Wonderful. Thanks a lot, Soldier. Thanks to all of our speakers this morning. Thanks for your patience, everyone, with our technical hiccups. That's all from me just now. I'm going to hand over to Sally just to remind us what's coming next with our next session. Thanks to everyone. Sally, just over to you. Tell us what's coming down the tracks in the next webinar.
Thanks, Eddie. Thanks, everybody. If we could have the last slide, please. Thanks for joining us today. We've put some links in the chat where you can find recordings, presentations from this series of webinars. We've had 3 webinars. We've got another 3 to go, so keep posted. The next one is next Tuesday. It's going to be on integration, and we're thinking about how we achieve cross-sectoral, cross-policy integration in the work that we do at local level. We're going to have really interesting inputs from Tuscany, from the operational program, from Alba Iulia, and from the city of Ghent in Belgium. So please join us. We've put the registration details in the chat. Great session today. I've learned a lot. I hope you did too. And we look forward to you joining us again next week for the webinar on integration on the 17th. Thanks a lot and have a great day and a great weekend. Bye for now.
Thanks, Sally. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.